Hello. Wow, there it is. I can hear myself now very well. Hi, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I am Molly Steers. I'm on the Board of Trustees here at the Kingston Library. I also chair the Community Engagement Committee, which, in conjunction with the library, of course, is bringing you this wonderful series called Kingston Meet Yourself. The aim of this series of programming is just to connect the community with their local leaders, some elected, some not, just to kind of give you a little bit of information as far as who they are and what they do. Do you know what a comptroller is? Do you know what the sheriff and the police chief actually do? Who shares what kind of responsibilities and who stays far away from the other as possible? So to that end, we want to thank Chief Tinti and Sheriff Figueroa so much for being here this evening to give us a little bit of insight. I'd also like to thank Ulster Literacy Association and it's all right, and the library for providing everyone with these fantastic reusable bags. Please take one. There's some information in it as far as a little bit further library programming. And if you're really, really interested in the library, you can also join the Friends of the Kingston Library. We do meet quarterly, and we get to have a lot of really great events and just keep this wonderful organization going, as well as, the taxpayers' contributions. I want to again thank Radio Kingston for bringing it to the public at large. For anyone who couldn't make it here tonight, I hope you're cozy at home. And if you have any questions, feel free to drive on in. So we will begin with just the chief and sheriff just giving us a little bit of background as far as what their departments really handle, who they are, maybe what made them want to become police officers in the first place. Whether it's just riding around an adorable little car when you're a kid or having a bad run-in with a firefighter and wanting to feel superior. Thank you both so much, and I'll let you take it away.
You go first. It's your city.
No, go ahead. How are you?
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Juan Figueroa, and I'm from the town of Plattekill. If you don't know the history of Plattekill, there's a large Latino population. It was first Spanish, and then in 1948, the first Puerto Rican villa started. So there were a lot of these businesses that opened up their doors in the area. That led to my family coming up here, and we had some folks that actually owned one of the places out there. It was like as they call the Spanish shops, or the Borscht Belt, or the similar. And a lot of people don't know the history of the town, but it's an interesting place to live. My parents moved us up from New York City to get a different perspective on life. And it's funny, when I went to high school, the majority of the folks that I went to, actually junior high school and elementary school, were African American and Puerto Rican. I came to Walk Hill because I graduated Walk Hill High School. That was completely opposite, so it was a little culture shock when I first moved up. I joined the Marine Corps right out of high school, shortly after the bombing of Beirut, and it was a sense of service for me to give back to my community, and so much that they've given to me. After my 4 years of active duty, became a New York State Trooper. I was right here at a State Police Kingston. I still live in Plattekill, and just the sense of serving and doing good is the way I was brought up by my mom and dad. I became a Marine Reservist after that. I was a plank holder at Stuart Newburgh, so I continued my career in the Marine Corps. I retired after 22 years, Desert SEAL, Desert Storm vet, and I went to 12 different countries. I guess I always wanted to be a police officer. It was, I have family that were in law enforcement, and I never knew that I would be a trooper, because at the time in the 70s, you had to be like 6 foot tall. But of course, thank God that changed in the 80s, because as you know, I'm not that tall. But nonetheless, I had a great career with the state police, where I transferred to Middletown, and then eventually White Plains, and then ironically I ended up working almost 2 decades in New York City with the Special Investigations Unit. And the rest, as you can see, is history. I got into politics, and I got elected the sheriff this past November. So next week will be 1 year in office.
Outstanding. So my name is Gidio Tinti. I've been chief since 2011. Worked for the police department, and only police department I've worked for since 1992. So I came on, parents both from Italy. They met here, grew up in a very disciplined household. My father and mother both came over. My father was 21, my mother 18. She had gone through like a year of high school here, but my father really spoke very little English at all. So they sent me to kindergarten in the Bronx where we were, not speaking a word of English. And back then, there weren't the programs that there are now. They called up and said, you got to come and pick up this kid. He can't understand a word I'm saying. So they sent me home, and actually I thought to myself, I asked my mother when I got home, did I do something wrong? Like, why am I home? And she explained, no, we'll teach you. So my father taught me broken English to the best of his ability. But so they moved up. I came up when I was 6, 7 years old, moved up to the town of Olive, and country bumpkin most of my life. I'll get really long story short. Out of high school, I worked for my parents. My father had a construction company. It was just kind of a family thing. And I say family, my mother, myself, and my father was the family. We had one other guy helped us from time to time. And at one point, my father and I had a big fight. I knew everything. And so to make it kind of funny, which really wasn't, I said to him, well, this is the way we're doing things now. And he said, no. And I said, oh, yeah. So he grabbed me by the back of the neck, and he dragged me down to his work van, and on the side of his van was his name. And he said, when the van reads your name and not mine, you'll do it your way. And until then, it's my way. A lot of curse in Italian, but he got the point across. So at that point, I said, I'm going to get myself my own van. So we didn't speak for 3 days, and at one point he pulled me aside early in the morning and said, this is not good. I'm going to lose you like a son. If this is the way it's going to be, this is bad. So he said to me, you're fired. And essentially, that's the truth. He said, you're fired. And I said, whoa, what are you talking about? And he said, yeah, you're fired. Do something else in life. So a friend of mine was a cop, and at the time I was a competitive pistol shooter, and he said, well, you like guns? Cops carry guns? Become a cop. And that's how it happened. I was a volunteer firefighter for many years. Worked, volunteer with the town of Olive. We had a series of calls, mostly structure fires at the time, and took the test, passed, came on in 1992, which was the tail end of the crack epidemic in Kingston. And again, as a country bumpkin in the town of Olive, I was shocked. I really knew very little about Kingston itself as a community, and was exposed to a world I've never been part of. I mean, I grew up in the town of Olive, as I mentioned, went to Ontario High School, and the racial makeup there was, I think there was one African-American family in the whole school at the time. Like, that was unusual. And so I came down here, and, I couldn't understand the dynamic that was at place at the time. And it was explained to me very clearly by the cops that a lot of the community members didn't like the cops. And so back then, I started to try to develop a community policing attitude towards a lot of things, and we're still trying to get that trust and accountability factor out there. My street name back then, believe it or not, was Smiley. Because I had no feather. I'd pull up and go, hey, what's up, Smiley? I'd go, hey, you're under arrest. What are you talking about? Yeah, put the hands behind your back. And so I worked up through the ranks, and then in 2011, I got promoted to chief. And it's been I think I've worked harder in the last 7 years than I did all the years before, to be honest with you. It has been a tremendous amount of work. Before, they say, right, you used to worry about your own gun. But once you become a supervisor, you got to worry about everybody else's gun. And it's been a big battle for us with the dynamics that take place in the city and some of the pushing and pulling at the local level. It's difficult, but we're still at it. And at this point, I'd like to take an opportunity to thank Sheriff Figueroa for everything he does for us, because we do work together well. The SO and the KPD have worked well together for years, and that relationship continues.
Thank you, Chief. And it's true that we have to work in conjunction with each other, because we have to. We depend on each other, and we help each other. And I also thank KPD and the Chief for, the only city in the county is the city of Kingston. It's a tremendous responsibility, and I know that.
Whew, yeah, sometimes I wonder. I try to make light of it, but it does, right? We have, from the point of view from the influx during the day, we have a huge population increase, right? And everyone's trying to come into the city to work, it's the county seat, and at night, everyone's trying to get back out, and it is, the traffic and the types of events that we have, unfortunately, we just recently had a shooting that we're really kind of devoting almost all of our energy on right now, and it presents its challenges, it does, so. But yeah, I agree, we work very well together.
For those of us who sort of live and work outside of law enforcement, can you give us some kind of particular specifics about the responsibilities of the police department and the responsibilities and the roles of the sheriff's department? Because I couldn't answer that
Right, like,
question.
is it geographic or is it?
Sure.
Topical.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, yeah, that's good, yeah.
You want to go first?
Go ahead. You can go first. Yeah. So part, it is geographical. For me, it's geographical, right? So I'm responsible for the city of Kingston. Geography-wise, we're a unique city. We're surrounded on three sides by the town of Ulster, so we also work very well with their agency as well, Chief Priority out there. So town of Ulster surrounds us, and on the other side, over the bridge, obviously, is Esopus. So for us, there are some challenges that way. We're not right off the thruway, but we kind of are off the thruway, right? We're easy access. We have numerous areas that we have to cover as far as exit routes or entrance routes in the city, 32, Washington, all that area back there. We do have a large stadium that attracts a lot of people in. We have a growing, very diverse population here that doesn't really exist in many other places in the county to the size that we are. So, but geographically is really the basis for it. As far as my responsibility as chief, I work for the city government, right? The mayor and the council. I meet with the mayor regularly once a week, and whatever his ideas and his goals are, I try to implement them with the resources that I have. Internally, the higher I got, sergeant, lieutenant, and so on, the less I was of a cop. The role that I had at that time really wasn't police work. It was more policy development and, training and, budgetary stuff. And, I enjoyed that part of it. But now it really has been difficult. I say that the policy development, we're right in the midst of revamping our entire rules and regulations using a system called Lexipol, which really simplifies a lot of the things that we do by double checking them against state, federal statutes, our accreditation. Both of our agencies are New York State accredited agencies, which means we are really held to a higher standard when it comes to high liability areas, making sure that we exceed what the responsibilities are. So, the training standards, for instance, is a big part of accreditation. And for us, in order to meet that, we've got to do at least 21 hours of in-service, which is yearly training for the officers. But, I know we exceed that, we easily
Absolutely.
exceed that. So, but that's essentially the role of the police department in Kingston, is to serve the, 25,000 residents. And, our makeup, currently we have 71 officers as budgeted. We had a high of 80, and when I came on, we had 72, and it kind of fluctuated in between there due to finances and a lot of, population changes. And, when we had 80 cops, it was 2007. And then as soon as the economy dropped and jobs were scarce, it affected the police department as well. So, but now we're trying to revamp, and, technology has certainly played a huge role in that. Before we had to essentially fill everything out by hand, and today we have computers in the cars, apps on the phone, camera systems, license plate readers, that really automate a lot of the processes. Not everything is easy. There's still a lot of technology out there outside the grasp of some cops. We have police officers that work in KPD that have 42 years on the job. Now, just kind of put that in perspective, right? There's 42 years as police officers for the city of Kingston. Imagine, and when they pull open their flip phone to send a text message and they're hitting R, A, that it takes a while, right? So, and then I also have cops that came on that they never have their phone out of their hand, right? That's the technology that this generation, the new generation, is accustomed to. So we've got to be able to balance that as well, right? We have the cops that are, like I said, 40 years on the job, know everybody, because now they're dealing with the next generation of families that they once served, and the new cops that may not have that, that may know the people that they graduated high school with, And add on to that, and I'm kind of hijacking the discussion now, but
no,
feel
no,
free
we're
to
good,
jump
we're
in,
good.
Sheriff. And one of the challenges we've had, at least here as a municipal environment, is the recruitment. It is very difficult today to recruit officers, overall law enforcement. It's not a glamorous job anymore. It is difficult to recruit the individuals. One, I think the economy's good. So when you have someone that has capabilities and they look, wow, I can make twice the money. What am I doing? So, and, today there's a lot of it. I know I experienced it myself. My mother was worried when I became a cop, and there's a lot of times when we had an interview about a year ago, an individual that came to us, took the civil service test. We're a full-time civil service, so we don't have part-timers. That's just the way the system's designed in Kingston. And the individual took the test, passed it, was a great candidate. We offered him the job. And he currently, at the time, lived in Poughkeepsie with his family, and then called me up 2 days later and said, I've been thinking about it. I appreciate the offer, but right now I'm working at a place. It's a little bit farther drive, but I'm essentially working Monday through Friday as a cop. I don't have to give up my holidays. I don't have to work midnights. I don't have to worry about, missing out on the important things with my family. I appreciate the offer, Chief. That's it, and it's difficult. And on top of that now, we, as the police department in Kingston, are competing against the sheriff's deputies. We're competing against the town of Ulster, New Paltz, for the same candidates. So that makes it a little bit harder to do, and that is probably one of our greatest challenges right now, is to recruit individuals into law enforcement and then recruit them into, in my case, municipal policing, right? Because it's not like in the county level or in the state police where you can move and go to here, and you mentioned you should be stationed down in New York, and in Kingston there's no, you're uptown today and maybe you're downtown tomorrow. That's it, 6.5 square miles. Here we are, and we're driving around, and on the midnight shift they put 45 miles on a car in the city of Kingston. Now think about that, right? That's just driving around looking for stuff. And when you're out in the highway, it's a little bit different, right? If you're in the county or even some of the larger townships like Saugerties or Olive. But for us, again, the advantage to us, and this is where when I used to be part of the police academy, I say I have an incredible respect for sheriff's deputies and state troopers, because they're out there. They're going to be out there handling a bar fight, and their backup is 20 minutes, 30 minutes away. In Kingston, if we have something happening in Midtown or Uptown or downtown, 30 seconds, 40 seconds maybe before the next car gets there. So, that is a huge, huge factor. And like I said, I've always had I've told the deputies in the state, those township officers, you got to have your game on. You can't play around when you're out there, so. I'm sorry, I'll turn it over.
I want to pick up what the chief said, though, because it's a very valid point, that these civil service law enforcement jobs, you're never going to get rich at. And the reason why folks like ourselves do these jobs is because you want to do something good for society, do something good for the people, but also they had good benefits, and you don't see that anymore. Now you have 6, 7 tiers. You have to retire at 55, and this really is a young man's game. This is not an old guy's, someone that's older chasing a 20-year-old down the street. It just doesn't work like that anymore. And so it is a young man's game. I was lucky in my career, having both the Marine Corps and the state police. Administratively, I was an admin guy in the Marine Corps at the later part of my career, the last 10 years. And in the state police, I was always in the trenches, and I kind of like that. I like to have that, both sides of that. And then my experience in the corporate world was unique because it gave me a perspective of what other people actually think about us. We all live in bubbles, and we all, most of my friends were either troopers or police officers or Marines. But when I went into the corporate world, and I was there for about 5 years, it gave me a different perspective on things. And I had a little time to decompress from law enforcement. This is a unique job, being the sheriff. It's an elected position. And I heard you say sheriff's department. It's not a department. It's an office, and it's an office because it's an elected office, similar to the district attorney's office or the county clerk's office. One of the things I learned when I went to sheriff's school is don't call it a department, because you're not a department. And I work for the people. I don't work for the county executive. I work for the people of the county, and there are 180,000 people in the county. There are 20 towns, 3 villages in the city. We're lucky to have a great police department in the city of Kingston Police Department, and the chief and the mayor, and we have a great relationship with them. But there are a lot of towns that don't have local law enforcement, and that's where we come in, whether it's Hardenburg, Denning, along, of course, with the New York State Police. And so a lot of people say, well, why do we have so many different agencies? It's like the chief said, it's a government. So you have city government, county government, state government, federal government, and each entity has its own law enforcement. I did 25 years in the state police, and I was an instructor at the academy, and I had to teach a lot of people don't know that it was 2 women that started the state police, and they started the state police in 1917 because there was a homicide down in Westchester County, and when they went to the local police department, they realized that there were uncles and cousins that were all in the police department, and the person that actually committed the crime was related to the chief, and the chief didn't want to do anything. So that's how the state police was formed, and that's why you have different governments and different agencies that you can reach out to if there's any issues with the local office at your area of jurisdiction. But it's really maintained by local governments. And the sheriff's office, we have a $34 million budget. We also have the county jail, and we have a 458-bed and a facility, and we have 160 corrections officers. We have 80 deputies, both mainly full-time, but we have part-timers as well. And we do everything from dog barking complaints to homicides. And we cannot operate without each other today in today's world. The local, like the city of Kingston, they know all the people in the city, where those in the county, we're not going to know specific issues that occur within a municipality. And so that intelligence and that they have that relationship with their public that the county doesn't necessarily have. And they know the issues in their own local municipalities. And so it really is asset and intel sharing. And one of the things, besides the jail, besides the road patrol that we have, we also have the civil division. So we do pistol permits, income executions, like garnishing paychecks. We also do civil evictions, and civil subpoenas, and so it's a pretty big operation. We have 60 nautical miles on the Hudson River that's up and down. We have 2 boats, one in Saugerties, one in the Roundout Creek. We have a Ulster County emergency response team that's made up not of just the sheriff's office, but other local towns, again, because we can't do it by ourselves. It's just impossible to do. We also have urgent, and we work in conjunction with the city of Kingston, and that's our task force. We're in a unique area where we're in the southern part of the Northern District, Federal District, and the northern part of the Southern District. So nobody wants to work up here because it's in the middle, to them, in the middle of nowhere. It's either Albany or New York City. And so it's a unique geographic location, and that's why it's important to have a task force, again, made up of the different entities throughout the county. We have hostage negotiators. We have a drone detail. We have a water rescue team that if somebody falls through the ice or somebody decides to jump off of one of the bridges that we have on the Hudson, we'll have that. We have that asset that can go out and find and locate these people. We have a huge county. It's 1,061 square miles. That's a lot of a turf, if you will. But again, it's working. We have, I believe, 4 full-time police agencies in the county, to include the city of Kingston. But again, we work in conjunction with them. But the unique part about this office that it's unlike the others, and trust me, there's plenty of politics when it comes to being a chief. My eyes were opened when I took office on the politics that the chiefs have to deal with. And they have to respond to their boards, the city councils, their mayors, or their supervisors. But as an elected official, it's also a unique thing because you vote for me. And I tell people when I talk to them and I run into them, whether I'm having a cup of coffee somewhere or having lunch, that I work for them, whether they voted for me or not. It doesn't matter, because I represent everybody in the county. And when I make a decision, it's based on what everybody thinks, not just one side or the other, but what's best for the community. So that's what makes this office unique. But we are a partnership with local law enforcement, the cities, the towns, the state police, our federal brothers like Homeland Security, the FBI and the DEA, and so it's all about sharing our assets. For example, the state police, they have the forensics unit that we all use, because we don't have that capability. And so it's important to partner with the state police on that. And, they have helicopters. We don't have helicopters. And they also have a scuba team, and we train with them as well. So, and that's in a quick 5 minutes, I guess, or longer, what the sheriff's office does.
That's great. Do you guys have anything else you want to tell us right now before we start asking any questions that people might have about your individual offices, departments, tasks?
No, I think, I'm good on my end, yeah.
I will say one thing about the people that work in this county, being a trooper for 25 years and a recently elected sheriff, and the way they work with each other and the professionalism, that they're out there to protect everybody. And so when a crime occurs, you shouldn't automatically put your guard up that they're trying to do something negative. That's not what law enforcement's role is. And it's true what the chief said earlier about our efforts to recruit. It's been a huge issue. When I came on, I made $19,000 a year. It wasn't about the money. But of course, today the job's a little bit different. It's not the same benefits. As you know, pensions are being looked at differently, and I believe a pension is part of our economy. It's someone that's becomes a certain age doesn't have to rely on their family to take care of them when they have a pension, because Social Security, as we all know, is not enough. And so it's a unique job and it's a tremendous career. And one of my jobs is to recruit from all facets, especially those that look like me, which we lack so much of in law enforcement, people of color and Latin Americans and Latinos and others. And it's important that we explain to them what their role is and how it is their job to represent their communities. And that's really what it comes down to, and I just wanted to add that.
Does anyone have a question that you'd like to ask?
We'll use the microphone. Oh, there it's back. Hello. We'll use the microphone so everyone at home can hear pretty well. Who you, sir?
Yes, thank you. I have a question for the chief. I'd like to know what are the police department's priorities? What are their priorities? You have to have, what is their highest priority in the city of Kingston? Or are their priorities at a list from the top down? What is the number one priority for the police department?
Protect the residents.
What?
Protect the residents.
And then the second one?
Protect property.
And the third?
We could go down the list. There's,
Okay.
I don't know where you're going, Joe.
The reason why I'm asking this question, because I attended several ward meetings with constituents in the ward, and their biggest complaints were speeding.
Okay.
Speeding.
Yep.
There were so many complaints on speeding, it appeared that it was a quality of life issue. Okay? Now, the council has proposed, or they're putting forward, which went back to committee several times because it can't seem to get past the council, to reduce the speed limit to 25 miles an hour. And their answer is it's going to incur a calming for the speeding. And I attended these council meetings, and I argued with them. I said, when the police department can't enforce 30 miles an hour, why are you lowering it to 25? Okay, because nobody obeys the 30 miles an hour. Okay, and the only thing 25 miles an hour speed limit's going to do is going to change the fine structure for the residents of Kingston. that will be paying more in fines. And it's not.
Only
it's-
if they're speeding.
Huh?
You mean only if they're speeding?
If they're speeding.
Right, if they're speeding, they
If
shouldn't be
you-
speeding.
If it's 30 miles an hour and you're doing 35 and you get a ticket, let's say, I don't know how much it'll incur, $10. But now if they reduce the speed limit to 25 and you're doing 35, now you're doing 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. What if you were doing 36 and you were doing 11 miles an hour over the speed limit? Now, I know that is
Is this a math question?
That's
I'm
a
gonna need
key,
paper.
that's a key number, 1 mile an hour over the 10, because you could lose your license,
Okay.
right? If I'm doing on the thruway at 65, so if I'm doing
glad I'm the sheriff.
76.
I'm trying to follow. We went
You're
from 35 to
following me, you're
65.
following me. If I'm on the thruway
There's no
and it's
65 in
65
Kingston.
miles an hour and I'm doing 76 miles an hour, can I lose my license?
Joe, you got trains heading south, and I'm trying to
Okay.
figure all this out.
If it's a quality of life,
let
it's
me
a
just
quality
address the
of...
speed. Let me address the speed,
Well,
because you
the
gotta
reason
do-
why I asked the question is because I asked the same question to the council person, and they couldn't answer it,
Okay.
okay? And that's why I brought it forward here.
So, speeding. Excellent. I'm glad you brought up the topic. Do we get complaints of speeders? Yes.
What?
Think about how many streets in Kingston. Think about where they are, right? We have no real high-speed stuff, right? Everything max.
No,
speed,
wait a minute.
45.
Glen Street, they do 70 miles an hour.
So we had the speed sign on Glen Street. We had the speed sign
Nobody
on
obeys
Washington
it.
Avenue.
Nobody obeys
I
it.
understand, but we track the speed, and then we get a report. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you people don't speed. Absolutely, they speed, but not to the ratio that people are saying everybody's speeding or everybody's doing 35. That's not true.
No, it's not true. It's only certain areas where
It's
they
like
do
the
the
stop
speed.
signs.
Clifton Avenue, Lindeman Avenue, Pearl Street, Glen Street, Marius, Greenkill. I mean, the way I heard it from the constituents in the wards, it appeared that it was a quality of life issue. And I believe it should be addressed as a quality of life issue and addressed as maybe one of your number one concerns. Because lowering the speed limit to 25 miles an hour is not going to calm the speed limit, okay? I don't know why they're doing it, okay, or why they're trying to do it, because it's not gonna work. The only thing that will work is to train the people and enforce the 30 miles an hour, and people will learn to keep the speed down.
So how many cars do you think are on the roadway at any point during the day? Say how many cars? How many cars are on the?
Oh,
I couldn't tell you.
Probably a great deal of cars coming into the
More cars
city.
than there are cops, right? You would say that there's 6 cops on duty. There's probably
Yeah,
more than
but
6
they're
cars
only
on.
in one, they're only in one area. They're in
So
the main
part of the law-
arteries. They're
part
on
of the law-
Washington Avenue. They're on Broadway. I mean,
Yeah, so
these are the main arteries.
Part of the law is there because we agree to abide by it. We as a society have said 30 is fair. At some point, maybe 25 will be fair. I'm not arguing with you. I'm just telling you that as far as the enforcement effort goes, we do have police officers out there that do pull over cars. If you check with the city court, you'll see that there are speeding tickets issued in the city of Kingston.
I can check with one of the worst streets in the city,
Okay,
which is mine, that I live on. 1 ticket in 30 years.
okay. How many warnings? How many
I don't know
times-
how many ones. There's
Okay.
never a policeman there. Nobody ever stopped. They don't stop for the stop sign. They speed coming from work and going to work.
So as a resident, Glen Street is one of how many streets in Kingston that are asking for the same type of enforcement? And you say
It's
it's a
not the
quality-
only- it's
you
not the
say
only
you're-
street.
Joe, I'm not gonna argue
I know,
with
I'm
you
not
here,
arguing
really.
with
I'm
you
just,
either.
we've always had a good relationship. I can answer your
I know
question,
that.
but the fact is, in your ward, this may be a quality of life issue. But think about what you're saying.
It's also-
If it's all over in the city of Kingston,
It's-
think about other places that their priorities are not the same as speeding.
Well, no, I just told you, I went to several ward meetings, and they had the same issue and the same argument.
Maybe the people that attended those meetings have the same issue.
Well,
But when I get calls in my office, it's not about speeders.
I don't know what you get
But
called,
we are-
I don't
and
know
you
what
know-
you get called to your office for. All I know is that the council
But to
person
answer your
called the
question,
ward
we
meeting,
do
I
try to
attended
enforce
it,
it to the best
and-
of our ability. We have
Yes.
2 speed signs out there to use it as a warning or a deterrent for speeding. But the fact is that it's like the stop signs, it's like the stoplights. We hope that people do it. The threat, and I say the threat of enforcement's out there because we do put patrols out. And there are times when officers do write the tickets or issue the warnings, and it's
maybe-
not just us.
maybe they
We rely
don't
on the
get-
sheriff's office, we rely on the state
Perhaps they
police.
don't get enough enforcement, okay?
So
the-
part of it might be, there's the enforcement effort for the tickets, right, as punishment for people. And then there's the calls for service. Understand that, again, when you pick up a phone in the city of Kingston geographically, you get a city of Kingston police officer
Yep.
responding. That may not be the case outside the city.
Well-
Right, the fact is that if you call in the town of Saugus, you may get a sheriff deputy,
Right, but I'm
patrol and
not,
state police.
I'm only talking about inside Kingston.
But again, when one of those 6 cops that are on patrol, if 2 of them are tied up handling a call for service, an accident, domestic, what it might be, now we only have 4 patrolling the rest of the city. So you have to understand that when you talk about priorities, this is on the list. When they're not responding to calls, when they're not answering calls for service, officers are encouraged to be proactive. When you say a quality of life about speed, we have also people that say, spend more time with the kids, visit the parks.
I don't hear that at board
You don't
meetings.
hear it at the meetings.
I don't hear
But this
it.
is the same thing that I get calls on, right? The reliance on police departments and police officers, sheriff's deputies, and state troopers have greatly increased. The responsibility, people call us for everything. When there's smoke, they call us. And our dispatchers sometimes politely will say, no problem, tell us where it is and we'll call KFD, right? We'll call the fire department. But it's very difficult to balance that because of how much we've absorbed over the years. When I became a cop, honestly, in '92, we did law enforcement. That was the goal. That was the role that's how it was. Today, that's not the case. You know, go
This
ahead.
leads into a question that I have, and that is,
Wait,
you've
I'm
both
done.
been in law enforcement for a very long
Well,
time.
I gotta finish
Almost
the
as long as I've
question
been
with
a
him. She
librarian.
interrupted me.
And I'd be
She
interested to
interrupted
hear
me.
about how the role has changed. What you're being asked to do today
Well-
that you didn't even imagine when you
I just
first
wanna work,
entered
if he's
law
working with
enforcement.
100% of his
You,
workforce.
you became a cop for various reasons. You entered law enforcement for various reasons. And, you were doing a job for a period of time, and now here you are, I'm gonna say decades later, being asked to do things that you couldn't even imagine. Can you speak to that, how the job has changed and what you're being asked to do now?
Yeah, the job has definitely changed. I mean, just with the technology and how people communicate. You and I and all of us are sitting here having a conversation face to face, but most of, the constituents don't communicate. Most of these young kids don't communicate that way. They communicate with a text message or an email, and there's not this face-to-face communication anymore. And it really has affected how we as a society communicate with each other and how we talk and how we solve problems. And that's one of the biggest changes. I remember when I was a trooper working out in Shandaken and Kingston, when the state police barracks in Kingston would call me on the radio, I couldn't hear them, so I had to get Oneonta, state police Oneonta, to call me, and then I had to go to a payphone and call up Kingston to find out what the complaint was. Think about that. Think about that.
Yeah.
But think about how times have changed. With, of course, the biggest issue. Look, law enforcement always had different hats. We're counselors. We're mental health folks. We do. I mean, we do these things. We're not certified or qualified like professionals, but we've been doing these things. Law enforcement has always done those type of jobs. What's different now is the role that the communities expect us to do. And look at the opioid epidemic. As you know, I rolled out this plan, and arresting people all the time is not solving the problem. So we in law enforcement have to change the way that we do business, and it's something that we're not used to and we're not comfortable doing. I mean, right now, and it is a culture change, and there's more changes that are coming in January. But right now in the jail, I'm starting a medical assistant treatment program. It should be in effect hopefully by January, but if we don't do it, we're probably going to get sued because people that it's already happening. The ACLU put out flyers out in Erie County, and there was an individual that was on methadone who was arrested for an offense that he committed, and he went to the jail, and they says we don't do methadone in the jail, well, that person is probably going to sue, and they have successful lawsuits in Massachusetts and in Maine, and so the train is coming, and we in law enforcement have to change the way we deal with things. And as tough as it is, I couldn't even imagine that, 10 years ago, that something like that would happen, that we would go to a scene of an overdose and there were drugs in the room and there was somebody else there, and that we wouldn't arrest them. But that's what's going on now. We're not arresting because we realize that these individuals, this is a mental health, not a mental health, but although there's a mental health underlying issue, but this is a health issue, a public health issue. And that's how we have to approach it now. What we've been doing has not been working. And we have, as you know, the second highest fatality rate per capita in the state. And so what we have done is got together with the County Department of Health, the County Executive's Office. I've been up to Monroe County where they have a medical assistant treatment program. I've been up to Albany County, and I see how they're doing it. And we're putting a plan together to institute here in Ulster County, to including an education and awareness portion of that. Why? Because there are parents that don't even know that their kids, and it could be as simple as having an accident where they hurt their back and they're on, pain meds, and they get addicted to it, and they move to the next spot, which is much cheaper, which is heroin. And so it's a huge epidemic and a huge policy. If we look at, and you started out saying about the crack epidemic, I remember that because I was a trooper in 1988 when I first came on the job, and the way we're handling things back then and the way we're handling things now are completely different. And so it's a huge sea change in what law enforcement has done in the past and what the public expects us to do now and for the future, because that's what the community expects from us to do. And yeah, it could be difficult at times, thinking about this and how we approach it. But what's great about law enforcement is that we are adapting and we are moving toward a goal where we're actually helping. And I'd rather help somebody than see them end up at the county jail.
I believe a tiny one. Oh, he had next, and then I'll come right to you, and then I think over there where was one, some of yours your hand.
Okay. Thank you. So you wanted me to ask this question.
He'd been asking me, we had been watching X-Files a lot, and he'd been asking if there were any really strange cases that either of you stick out in either of your minds that you remember as just being like, that's the weirdest thing that didn't realize I signed up for. So it kind of goes along with what you were speaking about.
So you go first.
Strangest cases? Wow. Nothing comes to mind, and we've been involved in quite a few, unfortunate, but what I find interesting, kind of going back a little bit to the last question, is, I came from a volunteer firefighter background. We'd get there, we'd put out the fire, and we'd go back, fill the truck up, and wait for the next one. And that's what we did. So my expectation as a cop was we would get there, handle the call, make an arrest, and go to the next one. And again, raised in a very disciplined Italian household back then, it was about familia. Everything was in the family, and that's just, we yelled and screamed and carried on and threw bread across the table, but that's just the way we were. I never expected to be at a job, and I still remember something that happened not far from here, where I was called in by the parents to discipline the child as a cop. And I'm thinking to myself, and I was, I came on as an old cop. I was 27 years old when I first got my badge, and I worked nowhere else. This is what I know. So for me, I actually remember looking at the parents and going, you want me to discipline your child? And I grew up, and again, in Italian house. Listen, I don't think that's right. Just take them out back, spank them a couple of times, and bring them back in. And they looked at me like, you can't spank a child. What? Of course you can. So I remember asking the sergeant about that. The law says you can spank them, right? So I don't remember any cases, but what's interesting to me is that when you get to a scene, it doesn't have to be horrific, and you have to rebuild it. You have to say, what happened here? And now you got to try to figure all that out and track it down and talk to this person. And as the sheriff mentions, the technology changed. In '92, I had a cell phone. You know, you pull the antenna out, you plug it into the car charger, and it was a big bag phone. But more often than not, when you had a special call, they wouldn't put it over the radio. And again, back then, the cars had one radio, switch for the lights and sirens. You know, we carried a shotgun, five shot shotgun in the rack, and that's all we had. There was one radio. So when they said, you know, contact headquarters, you'd have to get to the payphone, pull up to it, and in Kingston, we just give them the last four digits, 8790. You'd call on the radio, 87. The phone would ring, and then you'd be, yes, Sarge. And you go, listen, I need coffee, bring one out. And, you know, whatever the call was, and you say, okay, I'll be right there, and you'd hang up the phone, and that's how it was. And for me, I think that you know, even our last chief, Chief Keller, really didn't have to worry about cops texting while driving. You know, carrying a cell phone and listening to the radio, or that wasn't a problem. I mean, there were cell phones, but it wasn't like it is today. So today, when you tell a new officer, hey, listen, by the way, just put that away for the tour, they're like, whoa, what? What are you talking about, right? You can't get students to do that in a college class. You can't, and so it's almost unenforceable, right? At that point, especially when you're trusting an individual to be out on patrol. Here in Kingston, we have a pretty small net when you think about it, right, as far as the coverage goes. But you got deputies, you know, all over the county from all different substations, and you're thinking to yourself, well, you know, at 2 o'clock in the morning while they're driving around, and now they're watching YouTube on their phone waiting for the next call. Not that that happens. I'm just saying that I know in Kingston, what's to say a police officer doesn't park here and just kind of sit there, because our first dash camera, again, now we have body cameras, everything. Our first dash camera was literally a video camera, shoulder mounted, strapped with bungee to a radar mount on the dash. And you would push the button to start it and record your stop, and then push it again, and it had VHS tapes. And that's what we did. That's how we recorded this information. And today, the technology, whether it's a smartphone, the body cameras, has made it tremendously easier to document, you know, what the officers are doing. Are they following policies and procedures? You know, the use of force, all those things that are of concern today. And but getting back to your question, I'm sorry I kind of diverted a little bit. That's what I found interesting. Is when you get there and you look around, you say, "Wow, this is all. What happened here?" And you know, one case came to mind where the door was locked, the glass was broken, and we just couldn't figure it out. And you know, through the course of a couple of days, it all came together, and you go, I get it now. And so, yeah, that's interesting, the investigative part of it.
It is, and you know what else? And I look at it in a similar situation. We observe, what we're doing is observing human nature. We are all creatures of habit. You get up every morning, you have a cup of coffee, you go to the same store every Wednesday, you shop on payday. And so it's not that difficult at times to know that something different is going on. One of the things I did in the Special Investigations Unit in the state police is I had to do a lot of surveillance. Hours and hours and hours of following people and their habits and who they meet. And if they had a routine, you knew that, okay, nothing's going to happen today. But once they broke that routine, after observing human nature, observing that individual for hours on end, then you know, I knew almost instantly that something was going to happen today. And that's the most unique thing about law enforcement, when it's observing human nature, interviewing people, body language. And that's what makes it such a unique job. You know, a lot of law enforcement officers go through careers and they see so many things that normal people don't see. Whether it's a homicide scene, whether it's an issue, an accident where an individual, it's a terrible fatality, and or you're investigating a horrific crime involving a juvenile, and so there these things that I remember at a certain city in the Hudson Valley, where I went into, I was undercover and I went in to go purchase some narcotics, and I go up the stairs and the stench just smacked me in the face, and I'm like, what is that smell? So I go up the stairs, and there was a person laying on the ground there. They were alive, but they had a syringe, and I'm going back to the 80s, hanging out their arm, and with scabs and maggots. And I was like, to this day, I can't even imagine I don't look when they're drawing blood or giving me a shot. I can't look at it because I remember that. And so, law enforcement, that's why it's a young man's job, because you see so many different things that normal people don't see. All these arrests and search warrants that you do, to go after because there is a criminal element out there, and the adrenaline that flows through your body has a tremendous effect on the human body upon retirement. When you're on, and I use this as being in the left lane, your life is being on the left lane. And then you have to go in the driving lane when you retire, and your body just doesn't know how to react to that. So it's a unique job, and it's special in many ways. But in reality, it's about observing human nature. And so when you look at law enforcement, I want you to think about that, what that individual goes through, and why there's a 20-year retirement or a 25-year retirement. It's because it really is a young man's job. And, 10 times, 12 times a year of that adrenaline rush that each one of us do every single day, most people only have that 2 or 3 times a year. So and sometimes we get caught up with people constantly lying to us when we're interviewing them. And then we go through a phase where, all right, everybody's lying at me. Everybody's lying at me. Nobody's telling the truth. But in reality, that's not the case. Because again, you got to get over that hump of human nature and reaction when somebody does something wrong. A lot of us can see it better than others. For those that have kids or young ones, when they do, even animals for that respect, when they do something wrong, they have that look. Those can cover it better than others, right? As we're adults, guess what? You still have that look. You can't. It's just human nature, and observing it is amazing, and that's what makes this job such a unique job. Whether you're a detective, an investigator in the state police, a chief, a sergeant, and like the chief said, rules and regulations and violations happen within our own ranks, and they have to be disciplined when discipline is called for. And again, it goes to the whole picture of what, as the conservator of the peace, the sheriff also is responsible for individual rights. And the number one, priority for all of us in law enforcement is public safety.
Thank you.
I have a two-part question here. One thing is to say thank you for your services, both of you. I really appreciate it, especially where I live. And second of all, are you thinking about hiring part-time people since it's so hard to get full-time? Is that coming across the table at all? Because of so many things happening within the city limits? Is that a thought at all?
You're talking about specifically for Kingston?
Yeah.
Right? You
Yeah.
guys have.
We do have
Yeah, I know,
part-timers.
sure.
So, little quick lesson on the civil service part of it, right? In order to become a police officer in Kingston, you've got to take a written civil service test. The test is held locally, but administered by the state. They write the exam, they grade the exam, they give us the test results. In order to be considered for the position for police officer, you've got to take the exam, score high enough in the top part of it. You'll get called in, say you get 100 on the exam, you'll get called in for a physical fitness exam. There's certain standards you have to meet, push-ups, sit-ups, and a 1.5 mile run. The standards are set by gender, and then from there, there's a background investigation. Polygraph, medical, hearing, all this stuff goes into it. So that requirement alone is applicable for us full-time. There's no provision in our civil service in Kingston to hire part-time police officers. It has been considered in the past, it's come up every so often. There is a union issue involved with the police union and the city. They're, again, going back and forth with it. I don't know where that is now, I don't know how you do it. I look at some of the agencies around us that use part-timers. I think it's a challenge sometimes because the most recent officer we just hired, Justin Dixon, was a city resident, grew up, went to high school here, and had 2 part-time police officer positions in the county. And, difficult for him, I imagine, to try to organize. He said it really wasn't once you kind of get it. But once he became a full-time Kingston cop, he had to give up those 2 other those two other positions. So it is a challenge. The recruitment, as we talked about, is difficult. To kind of just catching a little bit for what the sheriff mentioned before, how's it's changed. When I came on, and you would see a scene, or it would bother you, and, the one thing I did, my daughter was born a couple of days after I graduated the academy, and, once you started going into handling these calls for service, I'd come home and, I was exposed to a SIDS death when I was on the job early on. Horrified. And I wasn't the first responding officers, but I saw my poor daughter didn't sleep for a year. Like when I came home, I'd be like this. Oh, okay, she's okay. Because I just couldn't, and that stays with you, right? And I couldn't, the same thing, right? When you see something horrific, the only people you could share it with are the cops. When your brothers and sisters are next to you in the car, you go, man, that was, oof. And if you work with salty old guys at the time, they'd be like, come on, kid, what are you kidding? Let's go. After work, I'll take you for a drink. And that was the way you handled the stress. Today, thankfully, over the last, I want to say 5 or 6 or maybe even 8 years, there has been a change. The state, at least the state level, has recognized the need for wellness as a police officer. I won't say that these new guys are, they're not drinkers. I see the new cops coming on, they have an occasional, adult beverage here and there, but it's not like it was.
That's for sure.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
That's for sure.
You look back and go, wow, that's unbelievable. So, and at the time, I was a full-time police officer, and I still did full-time construction. So I would come home, grab a couple of hours sleep, and go to work. And so I didn't have time for that part of it, but it would just amaze me how it's changed, and now it's in the academy component, and it's not just about the police officer, it's about the family, the husband, the wife, the spouse, the partner, whatever it might be, and how they're supposed to handle it. Just, I never really appreciated how it affected my family so much, not being there for Christmas morning, not being there for the games after work, or while I was here and my kids were playing ball, right? Not being there at night, working midnights, when my wife was sleeping at home by herself, taking care of the kids, right? So those are the things that now we have come to adopt. And Kingston has this unique schedule where it's a steady schedule. There are other agencies that rotate the A line, so you're not always on midnights, you're not always in the afternoon shift, you're not always on days. But those are contractual issues that have to be negotiated. So, but it is a challenge today, that, most recently that, after you go to the doctor enough, they start telling you things you don't want to hear. So you say, all right, I'll lay off the meat, doc. All right, I get it. And he's the same doctor that took care of my father. My father was an old Italian man who loved his bread and his wine. 2 things right to the end. The doctor would say, you can't have any of those. My father said, okay. And then he would go, and when my mother wasn't home, we'd get there, and he'd be in the corner with a bottle of wine and a piece of bread in his mouth. And it was just bad for everybody at the time, the way he just snuck. He was like a kid. You'd have to time down. But when the doctor says, listen, you got to take care of yourself, you see it. But when I came on, that wasn't the case. Now we talk about healthy choices, something that really, I'm like, healthy choices, that's either the double Whopper or the single Whopper. Right? That's the single. But back then, that's what it was, right? Burger King was open late. The diners were open late. That's what you have when it's 3 o'clock in the morning. But now in the academy, you talk about the healthy choice, right? Making sure you watch your carbs, you watch your no red meat, reduction, that kind of thing. And things that really you have to have, because at some point, the retirement system at 25, and I think it's tier 6 now, if you're not able to collect it, then what have you done? As a police officer, what have you done? You got to get there to get there. So, now it's the same thing. We've had police officers retire at 60 and never have packed a parachute. They don't know what they're going to do. They have been in, like you, and I love it, left lane for all their life, left lane. And now they're pulling off now, they're watching it go right past, and they don't know what to do. They haven't planned the exit, and that's very difficult. And they're not prepared for it. And that's why you see a high alcoholism, a high divorce rate, high suicide in law enforcement. So if we're not taking care of the police officers, if we don't recognize that as administrators, then we're not doing the community any good. We recognize that. We have to give them time. We last year we went through the Peaceful Guardian Project with Lester Strong, and it was an eye-opener. And to be honest with you, we're cops, so we joke a lot about it, oh, come on, and the singing bowl, the meditation, but it works. It helps. you know, the breathing stuff. You know, there's times, I'm the chief, right? I'm not chasing bad guys anymore. That's not the case. But sometimes I'll get off the phone, and I'll go, yep, nope, we'll take care of it. And I'll hang up the phone, and I'll close the door, and I'll just use the techniques I learned just to calm down a little bit, just to bring it back. Okay, that's good, right? The old days, my father's days, you'd just get up, throw the phone across the room, start yelling and screaming or whatever, and have a beer at the end of the shift. And that's not how it's working today. So again, challenges today that weren't there before. Not just technology, but health and wellness. I think that's a big component.
But talking about the part-time and full-time, again, it's the same thing. Civil service kind of controls that. The DCJS standards are